In seriousness, so I'm Manager of Government Affairs. In this role, I've got the great opportunity to interact with elected officials at the federal, state, and local level to advocate for policy that supports strong and vibrant manufacturing industry. And it's within that role that over the last 18 months, I've had the opportunity to engage with the folks at Strengthening Stark. You're going to hear a lot more about Strengthening Stark as we get into our conversation. But before we move too much further, I'd like to just go ahead and do some quick introductions of our panelists. So we'll start off with Rashu.
Hi, hello. Hi, my name is Rashu Mahalaha. I'm the economic advisor serving in the capacity of helping guide and move the Strengthening Stark effort along. I want to point out my partner back there, Janelle Lee. We are the duo that get to think about the economy, the workforce of Stark County every single day. So my background is I was born in India, and if someone would have told me 40 years, 45 years later I'd be sitting here in Stark County having this conversation, this would not have been on my top 100 list. But here I am. My background is in a wide array of corporate consulting, management consulting, entrepreneurship. About 2.5 years ago, started working here in Stark County in the capacity of economic advisory work. And I just have to say, I've had an opportunity to work in many communities. One of the things I love about Stark County is it's got this incredible big town, small town thing going on where it's got assets and resources, incredible spaces, leaders like Dr. Jones, and so we have all the big town stuff, and yet we also get able to maintain a small town, relationship-based community where incredible amount of things can be done through conversations and quick decisions, which is unique. That many communities can't claim that kind of an orientation. So it's been an incredible honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Ray, will you please introduce yourself?
My name is Ray Hexmer. I'm the president and CEO of the Stark Economic Development Board. I know what it feels like to be a minister, because you guys are all in the back pews. You're welcome to come up. It's good to see you back there. I'm not an economic developer by trade. I've been in this position a little over 2 years. I've spent my career in the private sector. I was in radio and media for 23 years. We sold a company, and then after that did a startup in the wireless before wireless was cool, and as most things, we were probably about 8 years ahead of our time, but we merged that into a company called First Communications, which was owned by First Energy, and we took that public in London and ended up selling that in 2015. So how did I get here? Steve Paquette, who was with the Stark Economic Development Board for 24 years, called and said, I'm going to be retiring, would you be interested? I said, I'm not an economic developer, and he said, I think we need someone in business. So this has been, I've spent my whole life in Stark County. Even though I've traveled, I always look forward to coming home, and it's been a unique opportunity to do something in a community that you love and get to work with a lot of people who also have the same passion and love for the community. So really glad to be here with you today and sharing with you what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, thank you, Brother Ray. It does look an awful lot like church seating, so I'll say it right up front. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen. My name is Bob Gessner. Until April of this year, I was president of MCTV, which is a broadband services provider in western Stark County and Wayne County. Retired in April after 40 years, and fortunate enough that my daughter has followed me as a third-generation leader of the family-owned company. So the last 6 months I thought I was going to be retiring, but I seem to be busier than ever, doing a lot of work with SEDB and other economic development organizations in Stark County. Currently serve as chairman of the Stark Economic Development Board. Glad to be here.
Great, thank you, Bob. So in Para's remarks, as well as a number of ours, you've heard the term Strengthening Stark on a number of times. So you're probably sitting there wondering, all right, what is Strengthening Stark? And so I'll give kind of the early history, and then I'll let Ray talk a little bit more. But in 2017, a group of community leaders as part of the Stark Civic Group, commissioned a report to take a look at Stark County, to analyze the data. And the high-level takeaway from that report is that Stark County is getting smaller, older, and poorer. And the report called for basically a bold plan in order to help spur and accelerate economic development, as well as to help improve access to opportunities for those in our community. And it's from that report that many different groups in Stark County, probably 30 different groups, have gotten together and are committed to working together in order to try to help improve our economic conditions. And so with that, I would just ask the first question to Ray. Ray, can you talk a little bit about the activities that have occurred after the release of the report and what strengthening Stark has become now?
And a lot of thanks has to go to the Stark Civic Group, but also Mark Zamolzik and the Stark Community Foundation. Strengthening Stark came from the foundations. The foundations were getting hit on the social service end with more and more requests, which made them take a look at the front end, the economic development end. And so it was a God wink that about that time was when the opportunity came for me to join, and I sat down with Mark, who was from the Timken company, and sort of shared their vision. And you look at it like you do a company. When we made an acquisition, we'd go in and we'd level set what the data is, what the opportunities were, and that's what Mark was doing with the research. And what Rashu has done is taken it a little bit farther. It started with interviewing 350 community leaders, community members from all different walks of life, gathering a lot of data and research to level set. And since then, what's really been neat is obviously Janelle, Rashu, myself, we can't push this work. Unlike a business, if you walk in, it's amazing when you pay people, they think your ideas are great, the strategy is fantastic. When you don't pay people, and that's not always the case. So we knew to really make this work, all we could do is we could not drive the bus. We could invite people on the bus and find the drivers that could take the different initiatives. 3 areas that we're focused on: business growth, a lot of what SEBB does; talent, which is you'll hear a panel discussion this afternoon; and then quality places. What things in our community can change some of the things that we're seeing happen when you face some of the trending. Our poverty level is going up from, and this is where the foundations got involved, from 9 to 15% since 2000. What Rashu has done and the tools that we now have in place, we now can start to strategize by neighborhood. How can a community, and we're pushing it out, we were with Massillon City Council last night, giving them the tools to say, let's look at where your biggest areas of poverty are. Tell us where the bus routes go. Where are the businesses in your community? So we've done that with the GIS system. Thanks to the auditor's office in Stark County, we've asked them to put that together. They've done it with a lot of time, but free of charge. We've done the same thing with Ohio Means Jobs and a lot of other partners like Stark State on the jobs database. We put a jobs database because we kept saying, well, how many jobs are open? What are those jobs? You can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So Rashu's work, Janelle's work, and a lot of the community efforts work has been to get a business plan in place, which we have with tactics and strategies and metrics, measurables, to hold people accountable like me for different areas that we have to accomplish to really change this trending. And the governance committee, which Bob heads the business growth, is community members that are handpicked from all over the county. It can sort of be the overseers that don't have any vested interest other than they want the community to move these initiatives forward. And that governance committee, in the last 4 to 5 months, they run the program. They run the movement. And we now have from each subcommittee what they want done by July 1st. And each of these subgroups are trying to help push that forward.
Great, thank you, Ray. Bob, my next question is going to be for you as the subcommittee chair of the Business Growth Subcommittee. The Strengthening Stark report found that there were 12 organizations in Stark County that are responsible for encouraging business growth. There's also a handful of different organizations at the state and federal level that have the same type of focus. What is Strengthening Stark doing to help align or coordinate those efforts better here in Stark County?
Okay, I think it might first be helpful to know what Strengthening Stark doesn't do or doesn't have. It's kind of a strange animal that it doesn't have a budget, it doesn't have an office, it doesn't have a staff, and it doesn't really have any authority granted to it by anybody other than sort of the government. What it does have, though, is the faith and the trust of the funding community, as Ray alluded to. And it's money that makes all these economic development opportunities and initiatives move forward. So what Strengthening Stark really does through its governance committee is evaluate proposals, vet them, review them, and then, if they agree as a group, sort of endorses that initiative to the funding agencies. So everybody realizes that better get, as Ray put it, on the bus. Get on the Strengthening Stark bus, earn their trust and their approval of your kinds of projects, and the money can flow to your organization. And that's really important. So to look more at specifics, we've identified 4 different industry groups that or types of industries that we feel are important to grow in Stark County. And very quickly, I'll turn in reverse order. Tourism, petroleum and plastics, manufacturing, and food manufacturing. And so we have initiatives in each of those. As far as tourism is concerned, it seems a little out of place compared to the other 3, but the Hall of Fame Village is such a huge investment that we need to pay attention to it. And the Convention and Visitors Bureau is really kind of riding herd on that aspect of it. Petroleum industry is sort of a promising industry for us. It's not all that well established, but we've already created an outreach program to industries in that industry to bring them to Stark County, socialize them and see them, and get them to see the promise of locating here in Stark County near the petroleum industry that we already have, near the pipelines and transportation. Food, of course, food manufacturing is a very large segment of our industry here, and we have events planned to help improve or increase the camaraderie in that food industry, make them more aware of their contemporaries, trade best practices, and try to make that a more solid group that we can use to improve food manufacturing as a whole. When it comes to, I guess you say, traditional manufacturing, there are probably 3 things that we're working on, and those 3 things are Ryan's job: talent, talent, talent. We need workers who are trained for the jobs that are available here in Stark County, and we're undertaking a number of initiatives there to try to bring job seekers together with employers. Overarching all of that, especially with the 3, manufacturing, food, and petro, Ray and SEDB really shoulder the lion's share of that work through what we call business retention and expansion calls. Those are physical visits to companies, hopefully talking to their top management with the goal of explaining to them what SEDB and Strengthening Stark can do for them, letting them know our resources and our capabilities, and then asking them, what do you need from us? Very specifically, how can we help you? And what do you need? Is it, transportation? Is it funding? Is it raw materials? Is it supply? Whatever it is. And we will just bend over backwards to find that for them. And in terms of our BR&E, as we look forward to 2020, the goal is sort of multifaceted. One is more of them, first. Second, higher quality by making sure we're focusing on our focus industries again. Third, by bringing in new partners to attract them to us. And finally, by professionalizing it a little bit more to give it a little more polish.
Great, thank you very much, Bob. So Strengthening Stark is focused on talent, business growth, and trying to make sure Stark County remains a quality place to live. And as we're having conversations, as each one of these pillars is meeting and talking about priorities and what we can do to help improve things in Stark County, it's important that we make sure that we've got the right people in those conversations, the right people with the expertise, with the knowledge of different programs that we have available. And Rashu, as in his role with Strengthening Stark, it bears a lot of the burden of getting everybody together and facilitating those conversations. Rashu, could you just talk a little bit about your processes, the way that you pull together the right people for the right conversations at the right time?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to share with you a conversation I was having yesterday. There's a gentleman sitting back there, Mark Scheffler. He and I were chatting yesterday, and he shared with me this story or this perspective that I think really helps contextualize the Strengthening Stark work, which is he shared the story of what's the difference between a spider and a starfish, and how do the two live? How do the two replicate? What are the challenges? And then I thought it was really interesting. So the difference that he was highlighting was, a spider is sort of top down. You chop the spider's head off and the thing dies. But a starfish, if you cut it in half, it ends up replicating itself and sustaining itself. So Strengthening Stark in many ways is a combination of that concept. An example he used is if you look at some of the political activities going on in Hong Kong, and there isn't necessarily a leader, there's, it's a movement that doesn't have a specific leader. Those movements tend to sustain themselves in a way that's different than if it's a top-down, one leader-driven initiative. So Strengthening Stark, in a way, vacillates. When we started the program 2 years ago, it was very much a top-down initiative. It was sponsored by a variety of the organizations that Ray mentioned, the Community Foundation, local businesses, etc. So it was led by a set of leaders that wanted to see a specific outcome. Through the exercise of strategic planning, data gathering, we came up with a plan. Last summer, we identified 37 initiatives that we said, here are the things that we must focus on if we are to make progress forward. So again, top-down, strategic plan, everything's nicely set in boxes. And then the work starts. Then we actually start to work with our partners to see what's going to stick and what's not going to work. And that's where we start to move into a zone where it's no longer Janelle and Rashu and Ray and our teams driving the work. It's really a collaborative affair. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, Dr. Jones and we had another 6, 7 presidents of universities all at a table thinking through what will our universities and higher ed do to support economic growth, economic sustainability, workforce development in our county. These aren't questions that Rishu, Janelle, we're not smart enough to answer those questions. And so this is where leadership with leaders like we have in the room really help drive the concepts, the ideas that are most important to them as an institution, and where they see the ability to bring collective impact. How we get 1 and 1 and 1 and make that add up to 22. So to go back to your question, Ryan, not that I don't think we're necessarily that smart that we thought this one as explicitly, but where we've ended up is we're trying to be very transparent with our work. We're trying to be very self-critical. Janelle and myself, we wake up every day asking ourselves, what are we not doing right? What is it that if there's a citizen in Stark County that looks at us and says, what have these guys been doing for the last year, 2 years? We better have some good answers for them. And frankly, we typically give ourselves a C- because we always think there's more that we can do. So establishing transparency, establishing ways in which we communicate to the community so they know what we're working on. Having a really strong governance team comprised of over 30 individuals from all parts of Stark County, from the public sector, private sector, elected officials, social service providers, to get their feedback that enables a system that allows for any new partner to look at the program and say, there's something here. And one of the things that I think we're starting to see in terms, we were calling it something else before, but now we call it a strengthening STARK movement. The movement requires credibility. It requires, hopefully some of you, as we wrap up today, maybe we'll have an opportunity for you to come to us and say, this is something we want to engage in more. So we have, in essence, a playbook. We don't necessarily have all the plays written out. By creating sufficient credibility that you can expect us to work diligently, to maintain an openness in critique, so you can tell us what we're getting right, what we're not getting right. I think that movement's enabling more partners to come to the table that weren't there day one. And in some ways, the flip side of the equation is that transparency works well for some people, and it doesn't work well for other organizations and leaders. So slowly, we're also seeing certain organizations take us half a step back, 2 steps back, which is that transparency can also create a nudge that perhaps some organizations aren't ready for. So again, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is something we had a deliberate plan on. It was written out as explicit directions, but I think through this process of, I love the word Kaizen. You do something, you learn, you repeat, you experiment with new ideas. I think that's where we landed.
Great, thank you. Rashu mentioned being able to sit there across from somebody who's not involved with strengthening STARK and answer their question. You know, what is strengthening STARK doing? What good are you bringing about to the community? And I'd just like to turn it over to Ray to talk a little bit about how strengthening STARK defines success, how it drives towards success.
But what ultimately is, you have to attach some metric to it. So to give you an idea of business growth, as Bob said, that's the one I'm most familiar with. Our goal, and I appreciate the team from Team NEO being here, we get Jobs Ohio grants, and we work very closely with the Team NEO team. They're our partners. So our goal, and they never like me to say this, our goal is to get our unfair share of those dollars back to Stark County. I want them all. To do that, we put together a strategy to say, how many calls are we making now? We made 75 2 years ago. We brought all of our economic development partners in a room. There were 23 people doing economic development in Stark County. And we asked them to make calls, and it was fine. Some made calls, some didn't. So from that we learned, okay, here's our team, and we took a little more on ourselves. So the goal this year was 225 business calls. Give you how that generates business growth. The only way we count this is if there's a contract with Jobs Ohio and the state of Ohio, which Team NEO and Walt Good help us with. So we had $135,000 in Jobs Ohio grants 2 years ago. We have $4 million this year. We had $30 million in payroll, new payroll that will occur in the next 3 years in Stark County because of projects like Hendricks and Polycom. So getting to more businesses facilitates those conversations that you can end up then measuring. So that we're trying to do that not only for business growth, but attach a metric on everything we're doing. Those list of things we're doing by July 1st, right before I walked in here, a gentleman who sort of helps us look at things, I said, okay, look at the ones we have metrics on, tell us the ones you don't think that we have right, or other ones that we can move forward. Population change and poverty is not a short term. It's not a 6-month solution. I wish it was. It's a longer term solution, but what things can we push forward short term that will have that long term effect, like you do in business? Median sale price of a house, payroll taxes collected in Stark County, CapEx expended for projects. So those are the kinds of things short term we're measuring to hopefully have an effect on those long term trends.
Ray, I'm going to stick with you for another question. Your organization, Stark Economic Development Board, is not only responsible for helping companies that are already here in Stark County grow, but also for attracting investment coming from outside of Stark County or outside of the state. Could you talk a little bit about the strategies that help guide you as you're reaching out to companies or other organizations outside of Stark County to attract them to Stark County?
It's selling. It's sales 101. It's, when we've had companies visit, it's even thinking tactically of someone, we had a guy say, we were looking at a property in Alliance, I want to see downtown Canton, even though it's an Alliance, strategically knowing which way I'm going to take him, or her. But it's trying to get the marketing and the sales part of it, and we're trying to be less reactive. We tended to be, hey, let's answer the phone if somebody calls. So this year we've done some unique things that we've, like Rashu said, all of this stuff we test. We pilot, did this work? No, that didn't work. Let's try to adjust it. So two examples are we did two of our properties and we did social media outreach to other communities. And then there was a building in downtown, many of you may know, called the Nationwide building. Nationwide's consolidated their offices to Columbus. 150,000 square foot facility with furniture in it. It's available to view this afternoon if any of you like to come and bring 600 jobs. But we said, we're going to give this away. If we can find, the asset is not the building. The asset was the 600 jobs that was in the building. So we now have a marketing campaign that's went the last 4 months, trying to attract people by saying, if you bring enough people here, we'll give you this building. So testing those kinds of things and being more aggressive, because it is very competitive. I actually had a gentleman up right after I took this job, another Godwink, a gentleman by the name of Joe Max Higgins was on 60 Minutes. And I asked him to come up and speak to our community right when we started this. He gives away the land. He is aggressive as all get out. He's attracted 15,000 jobs there. When the people got off from Japan to visit his facility, he knew their shoe sizes, he had cowboy boots for them, and he ended up winning the deal. That's how this is hand-to-hand combat, and what we're trying to do is we don't have shoe sizes yet, but we're trying to get to the point where we're a little more proactive than reactive on attracting businesses.
Okay, sticking with the theme of being proactive, let's say that I am a small manufacturer. My company is growing, having success. I'm growing out of my current facility. I can't find people to hire. I need access to capital, that sort of thing. A lot of challenges that many manufacturers or small businesses are running into. What steps can they take to take advantage of resources that are available in Stark County? And could you specifically talk about the Stark Business 911?
Sure. I was extremely amazed and wish I would have known what I know now about Jobs Ohio and Team Neo when I was on the private sector side. Because when I came into this job, I thought, oh my gosh, it's got to be this hard thing to get funding. They look at a 3-year period, so if you know anybody in business that's growing, it's very easy. Step 1, call me. I have business cards. Step 2 would be to sit down with that business and ask them, what's your growth plans over the next 3 years? How many jobs are you going to add? What's that payroll look like? Mostly structured towards manufacturing. Walt Good will dial into a conversation, and within usually 7 to 10 days, we can have an offer letter for that company. So, prime example, why we're reaching out to people like you is a gentleman by the name of Dave Grabowski from Standard Plumbing. Told him about this. He had a company in Massillon called Poly Packaging. He said, hey, one of my clients, Poly Packaging, is looking at estimates for an expansion. They're either looking at Michigan or Massillon. Called him up, went out that afternoon, because it was in the morning, he kind of stopped out, dialed Walt in. There were 15 questions they had to answer. They had those to us in the next day. 8 days later, they had a letter and an offer for $100,000 in grant money. That kept them in Massillon, and that's the aggressive nature. And it's not only Jobs Ohio. This treasurer has a great new program called Grow Ohio that I just learned about. So what we do is we invite our 23 economic development partners in, bring the treasurer in, and tell us all these different opportunities and grants. Because if that Poly Packaging took the $100,000 and reinvested it right away in that facility they were building and actually added more capacity because they had that grant money. To me, that's where, as Rashu says, 1 and 1 equals 3, and that's what we're trying to do.
Great, thank you. For those of you that have worked with Rashu, you know he has a very analytical mind. He's constantly challenging you to think about different ways to think about things. And one of those things he's constantly challenging us to do is take a look at data. Let's look at the data. What does the data say? Rashu, could you just talk a little bit about how we can use data to improve our economic development efforts?
Sure, yeah, thank you, Ryan. So one of my favorite sayings is, and I'll say it twice because I'm an immigrant, remember, English is still a second language to me. Data is the anecdote, data is the antidote to anecdotes. All right, data is the antidote to anecdotes. The problem or the challenge in the realm of community development, economic development is all of us are experts. Every single person is an expert in the realm of economic development, community development, politics. We know the right answer, and our answer is the right answer. So when you're starting a conversation in a community as large and expansive as Stark County, we have 375,000 people that live in this county. We're an extremely rural county, we're an extremely urban county. Our problems and challenges span a whole range. So, unfortunately, we don't have a common language. If I go visit the schools in Fairless, the experience that a Fairless student or the Fairless school administrator has versus what the experience is in Canton is very, very different. And so when we're trying to come up with policy decisions or trying to prioritize opportunities, we found that we were just completely talking past each other. We couldn't even agree to which problems we were trying to solve for. One of my favorite examples is, if you look at our Stark County unemployment rate, right now it's at about 4.4%. That's pretty much, we're at full employment at that point. That means everybody who wants a job, is looking for a job, we're all set. That's not really the full story. If you look at the data, neighborhood by neighborhood, across Stark County, and you drill into the census tracts, you find a picture that's incredibly disturbing, incredibly revealing. So Ray highlighted, thanks to, again, incredible partners across Stark County. Our county auditor's office, please, if you know anyone there, give them kudos. Your county dollars going to incredible work. They helped put together a GIS map for us, where we can look at our entire county and look and see what's going on in our neighborhoods, neighborhood by neighborhood. We have over a dozen neighborhoods in Stark County where the unemployment rates pushes 30 to 40%. Per capita income in these neighborhoods is $10,000 a year. That's the amount of money a person makes in this neighborhood is $10,000. So again, if you look at the overall picture, those nuances get missed. And unfortunately, without data, we can't prompt conversations. We can't prompt sensitivity. Another way to think about it is data allows us to really sort of tackle something at an emotional and a personal level. That's where, if we're going to do good work, I've got to convince you sitting on the other side of the table that this is a conversation worth having. This is a conversation that is important. And I can't convince you just by throwing words at you. I have to show you a picture. I have to paint a picture that's factual, that's hopefully bulletproof enough that we can get to having some tangible conversations. So then data can be used to incite some emotion, some insights, and then that sort of opens up the window then. Yesterday we were in Massillon, as Ray highlighted. We were sitting down, thanks to Bob. Bob helped set up a meeting with all the newly elected city council leaders, local city administrators. So we wanted to show them what was going on in their backyard. They have neighborhoods that have acute poverty. So as these new council members are taking positions, are making decisions on where their local city dollars are going to go, we're hoping that this data can help prompt that action. So that is the power of data, and data by itself is nothing. We have to make sure that that data is packaged in a way that's easy to understand and that's as readily available for all our partners as possible. So,
and I'm just going to add one thing to that. Where it really gets exciting is we presented the GIS system to neighborhood associations. So it was the foundations have neighborhood associations, like the North Market neighborhood. So we showed them the GIS, and immediately everybody wanted to see their neighborhood. And the one gentleman came up and said there was a large business. You can look at the business and you can look at the job openings. And he looked at the unemployment, and he said, you know what we need to do in the spring? We need to have call the business, let's have a neighborhood job fair. That's how the data pushes an idea. And we can't do that, but if you can put that tool or that pole, fishing pole, in the hands of someone, they might catch a fish. And that's the whole great thing that I saw with the data when it transfers into insight, into something that turns into action.
Yeah, I would just add there as well. I've been really impressed with the data. It helps to show, not just where there is an absence of economic activity, but it helps to our community organizations to better understand where can we provide community services. One example being, you look at an area that's densely populated by low-income residents, and you may be able to see where there's an absence of bus routes that are getting to that particular neighborhood, or where there's an absence of child care facilities. And from a community service perspective, you can adjust and perhaps try to get a bus route to go to that neighborhood, or try to figure out ways to get child care to that neighborhood to help alleviate some of those boundaries for those people becoming engaged in our economic system. I'd like to shift gears just a little bit and talk about regional collaboration, and that's something I think is very important that we also consider. It's easy to kind of stay siloed in our efforts here in Stark County and only focus on Stark County, when the fact of the matter is, a lot of times whenever businesses are looking to expand or relocate, particularly those investments that are coming from outside our county, they may not necessarily care about the distinction between Jackson and North Canton. They might not care about the distinction between Stark County and Summit County. They're looking for a certain piece of property that's close to highways, close to the resources that they need. And Bob, I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit about, from your perspective, the importance of regional collaboration.
Sure, I'm glad to. Obviously, Strengthening Stark was created on a foundation of collaboration. And some of you look like you went to Sunday school. So I'll tell you a story about an economic development project from the Bible that was absolutely, where collaboration was absolutely critical. I'm not a Bible scholar, I had to look it up myself. But if you read Genesis, you find that after the flood, all the people lived together and they all spoke the same language. And very quickly they decided to have the first economic development project. They were going to build a great city and a shining tower that reached all the way to heaven. God was impressed. Even God was impressed and said, look, these people all speak the same language and they can do anything they imagine. Look it up, it's in Genesis 11. But God was also concerned. He didn't want a tower coming all the way up to heaven. So he decided to put an end to it. Didn't send another flood. He didn't send a series of plagues. He didn't turn anybody into a pillar of salt. All he did was confound their language so they could no longer understand one another. And as soon as they couldn't speak to each other in the same language, the economic development project was finished, was done. So the lesson there, I'm not sure they teach this in Sunday school, but the lesson is your economic development projects will fail when you fail to communicate. So when Stark County, I don't want to pick on anybody in Stark County, so Stark County won't collaborate with Summit County, or one nonprofit won't collaborate with another nonprofit, or one city won't work with another city, it will fail. I mean, it just does. The organizations, companies that are looking to grow or looking to relocate don't care about our petty differences, about our sports teams, or whatever colors or tribes we manage to create for ourselves. We have to work together as a group, otherwise we're going to fail. Last night I used a different metaphor. You notice I got a new metaphor now. Yeah, I thought that was kind of fun. Amen. Yeah, can I get an amen? Yes, sir. The other, I use a different metaphor. Well, I'll use that for another time. So, but it's absolutely critical, and that's the role, I think. I'll go back to Strengthening Stark. Strengthening Stark by by gaining the trust and the faith of the funding community, is forcing us all to collaborate better. I'm not saying we weren't collaborating before, but we're learning to do it better. Governance committee, the subcommittees all have people from different parts of the community, different sectors of industry, government, nonprofit, and we're all learning how to work together. And that's been a fairly steep learning curve to make sure we all know we can trust one another. I think we now face another difficult learning curve where we each have to understand our respective role and play it and not want to be all things to all people. I think that's going to be a very, very hard learning curve when somebody says, you know, I'm in economic development, but I don't do that, so I'm not going to participate. That's going to be hard because that seems like failure. But in a collaborative world, it is not. The goal is for the county to become younger, more populous, and wealthier. It's not just any one little segment.
Great. Thank you, Bob.
Ryan, can I just add? I just want to add one little quick point to complement what Bob was saying, which is, I think one of the powers of our county right now is that we have an incredibly strong and a diverse plan. And I say, you know, I'm looking in the back, we've got the Urban League Executive Director sitting back there, Diane Robinson, who's very much, just to give an example of how leaders are integrating themselves and their plans into an overarching fabric of what we want to see developed. So why that's important is, a few weeks ago we had an opportunity to visit DC and meet some of the leaders with the federal administration. Our national partners, federal partners, state partners are looking for communities that have a game plan. They have a plan of action. They have leaders. They have trust. They have some proof that if someone was to give us $2 or $100 or $2 million, that we know how to spend it in a way that's going to drive economic impact in a way that's measurable and accountable. Guess what? We have that. So as we're having some of these regional conversations, Bill Kaler was here with Team NEO. So as we look at some of our regional partners, I think Stark County is really starting to differentiate itself from other communities, because especially for federal partners, if they're trying to give away money for different programs, and they have to work with a community that doesn't have that proof of concept, they don't have a little bit of history of demonstrating that they can apply and utilize these dollars in effective ways, they're thinking twice about those communities. And I think we're starting to differentiate ourselves from that perspective. I just think that as part of the regional collaboration story, I see us really evolving to where we could be in the future.
Thanks, Rashid. I'm going to ask just a couple more questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, feel free to write them down and then send them down to the end of your aisle. But at the outset, I talked about how I have 5 kids, and so I've been looking at their Christmas wish list since about August. And I think building up that excitement. And so I would kind of turn that question over to you guys and just ask, you know, as we go into 2020, you know, what's on your wish list? 1 or 2 things that either, you know, if we achieve this, I'll be happy, or if we were able to receive this, I would be happy. What's on your 1 or 2 things on your wish list?
You know, I'll go back to the last question, because I think it is such a foundational element, and that is that we, as organizations, the couple dozen of us who are involved so closely with it, that we truly start to collaborate, that we don't fear that somebody else is going to win, and that means we have to lose. It doesn't have to be a sort of binary or zero sum. We can all win when, you know, as we look at it, that when Hendrickson located in Perry Township, Navarre won because it benefits them, and Massillon won, and so did the rest of Stark County, because Hendrickson in Perry means there's a Hendrickson in Canton, and we all can win. So I think continuing growing that foundational element of collaboration is something I would really hope we can get right in 2020.
I don't know how this sounds, but I think I'm going to take a stab at it. I think Strengthening Stark and our leaders are well positioned and empowered to do the things that we need to. We don't need a lot of wish and prayers at this time. We want to pray because we don't want that crazy thing to pop up that's not predictable. So I wish and pray for that something bizarre and goofy and unpredictable does not happen. But at the same time, I would say we're in a place where we have the right parties, the right partners, the right funding. And one just funding story I think is really interesting. Oftentimes communities get hung up on this point of, is there enough money? How are we going to support the work? I think one of the pieces that's so interesting about money in this correlation to Strengthening Stark is we actually had partners wanting to give us money to support Strengthening Stark. We had to say, no, keep your money, we don't need it right now. That's a real thing that happened because we wanted to make sure that we had a diversified funding support and we had certain partners wanting to contribute more. So I say that because we have credibility, we have the partners, we have all the pieces. We need to be heads down, execute, and get some good wins next year so that our citizens start to truly sense that we're working on something that's important, credible, and meaningful for them. So I wish for no hurricanes, no crazy events. Just if we can get a clear path for the next 12 months, I think we'll be in good shape.
I want a Red Ryder BB gun. Actually, the one great thing about this work is when we interview those 370 people and you share this information, and every person, there was not one person that said, yeah, I knew that, we're going downhill. Everyone said, okay, what do we need to do? Which gave me great hope. So, my hope, I have 8 grandkids. I hope they go to a Stark County college or university. I hope all 8 currently are in the community. But to really enjoy what I enjoyed growing up in a community of this size where I had everything, but I was hour or two from everything else. We really have arts, we have it all. And I think the work that Dr. Jones and the other universities are doing, our K through 12, I'd like to see some of those areas that I used to drive through in the southeast end of Canton where there's poverty. And when you look at those levels, to help those kids have the same opportunities my grandkids do. What's really interesting at Allen's school is you'll see the only school that is going up in enrollments, Canton City, and part of it is there's a 3rd grade proficiency test that they have to pass. Well, what happens is, what studies show is, no matter where you are, if you go from kindergarten to graduation in 12th grade, you're going to progress at the same amount. But if you start kindergarten not being at that level, it puts you behind. So my other long-term wish is that in those areas with this data and with great programs like Stark Educational Partnership and Joe Chaddock and the schools are doing, that trend changes. And those young people become our workforce of our future. So that would be my wish.
I have another wish.
There's only a lot more.
No. I wish everybody would write this down. Polycom, POLICOM.com. It's a website. It's an economic development. Oh, Ray's even got a copy of it. Look for the data and download section and download this publication called The Flow of Money. It's written by a man named Bill Fruth. He's an economist. Every year they evaluate 330 or 383, I think it is, metropolitan areas, 551 micropolitan areas, and they evaluate them based on the strength of their economy. And this publication, The Flow of Money, it's pretty thin, an interesting read, is written so simply and so clearly about what makes an economy grow or shrink. And my wish is that everybody would read it and understand how our economy works, any economy. Because, again, going back to my Tower of Babel concept, if everybody understands the economy in the same way, if everybody speaks the same language, we will be much better able to harness the positive forces and restrain the negative forces that seem to affect us. So I really wish you would read The Flow of Money. And if you're on that same page, you can also download their economic strength rankings. The first 7 pages of that explain the forces at work that make an economy successful. Whether it's median wage and income and housing values and unemployment and so forth. So those 2 publications on Polycom, polycom.com, a quick read, and we'll all start, I guess, seeing and thinking along the same lines in terms of what makes an economy successful.
Great, thanks, Bob. One last question, we'll open it up to the audience. Say you're a resident of Stark County, currently unconnected with what's going on with strengthening Stark, not involved, but you want to be. What can you do to get involved? What can you do to help support strengthening Stark efforts? And maybe just real quickly on this one.
Sure, and I'll sort of point to Janelle again in the back, who's a very, very critical member of our Strengthening Stark team. She's out in the community every week. She speaks to the different Rotaries and social service agencies at schools about the Strengthening Stark work. And our objective in that outreach is to again, kind of going back to that analogy of Strengthening Stark's a fabric of stuff. It has programs, everything spanning from business growth, entrepreneurship, workforce. We have communities that are focusing on beautifying their backyard, make it more vibrant. So there's all kinds of activities that we are working on, projects that we're working on. There's some that we're, sort of shovel ready, working on the building of the thing, and others are still in sort of strategic thinking phase. I think where our citizens can get involved is, as you look at our work, number one, critique it. Critique it and tell us, did we miss anything? We invite your critique, we invite your feedback, because we know that there's so much that we don't see from our lens. So as you're looking at our work, if there's something that doesn't make sense, you think we're focused on the wrong things, let us know. We are 100% open to your feedback, critique, and we will respond in the best way possible that we can. So that's step one, to just make sure that we're going down the right path. Number 2 is, as you look at our work and you think of, if you're head of a social service agency, you're a citizen that's looking for a job, you're a parent and who desperately, like Ray, wants to keep your kids and your grandkids in the community, and you're trying to figure out, what can I, how do I connect myself or my relatives or my neighbors to local economic opportunities? We have tools. We've launched a jobs tool in Stark County that helps you see every single job that's open right now. Right now in Stark County, there's 6,400 jobs open. We can show you exactly what the jobs are, approximately how much they pay. We can show you what the trends of some of these occupations look like. So we have the tools, but with 375,000 people in the community, it's very difficult to engage with every single person. So hopefully if you go out there and talk to some folks, let them know that we have stuff, and if there's ways in which others want to add to it or help us evolve our thinking, that's one perspective that would be tremendously helpful.
The only other thing, Janelle, raise your hand. You can either give your business card to Janelle, or she can show you on your phone how you can text and get the Strengthening Stark updates and newsletter that will tell you all the work and how where you might be able to fit in.
I think I sort of look at an individual's opportunity to participate in Strengthening Stark goes back to that old adage of think global, act local. Sort of open your mind first and think about all the forces that could improve, whether it's the world or the state or the county, and then act locally as an individual. Because there are almost an infinite number of things you can do, because just about every pebble you drop in the water is going to make those concentric waves that are going to affect something. Give a struggling child in your neighborhood a meal once a week, and you're going to help them do better in school. Fix up that dilapidated house or that blighted property, and visitors will have a better opinion of our community. Give money to social service agencies. Volunteer your time. Shop at a locally owned and operated business instead of buying something online. And suddenly, 60% of what you spend stays in the county instead of 100% of it going off to Amazon and China. So there are a million things you can do to be involved in strengthening Stark as a movement, which really seeks to just improve the wealth of our community on an individual basis. So there are lots of things you can do. You don't even have to be involved with any organization. You just have to do something to benefit the community, small or large.
Thanks, Bob. With that, do we have questions from the audience? Great question. Probably best for all three of you to chime in if you'd like. What's one thing policymakers at the State House could do that would help strengthening Stark?
Go ahead and say it, Ray.
Send us the money. No, seriously, I think the programs that put in place, the Treasurer's program that I mentioned earlier, just it lowers a business's interest rate by 1%. That's huge. You know, that if I was a business person, I mean, that goes right to the bottom line. Those kinds of programs, the Jobs Ohio grants, the Ohio Means Jobs grants, things like that we can get right into the business quickly to help them grow or stay. Those kinds of programs, you know, everybody talks about tax abatements. To me, those quick programs to help on funding are more valuable than taking it in a tax abatement. I think there's other ways around it, and I really like what the state is doing from Jobs Ohio and the Treasurer's Office to try to, in Ohio Means Jobs, to try to infuse those dollars into the local economy.
Bob or Rashid?
Go ahead, Rashid.
Okay, so the following thoughts are only Rashid's. Please don't associate these with anyone else but mine. One of the challenging elements of working on programs like this is when you look out and you look at either the state or the federal programs, they seem really, really, really far away. And it's very daunting to identify the connection points. And again, part of it is, you know, it's our shortcoming that we don't know what the right questions are to ask sometimes. We don't know who to ask the questions to. So part of the idea is if we could, whatever we could do, we know there's some great state programs, but sometimes at a local level it's difficult to navigate the ecology. So I think having more explicit mechanisms, and again, I take responsibility because there's databases, there's websites, we could do a better job of looking at that information, but whatever can be done to help navigate those waters would certainly help not only us, but all of our local municipalities. And the second, which is edging on a political statement, is I think local empowerment. I think we need to continue advocating for local empowerment, local municipal empowerment, county empowerment, because so many of our day-to-day decisions and our spending decisions impact the day-to-day lives. And it just feels like the more we could be empowering local communities to be making decisions, and however the state and the federal programs think about that enables us. The distance between an action and a thought and an action is much closer at the local level. That distance grows exponentially as we go to broader regions. So, thank you.
Speaking of shortening connections, I can feel Richard Regula drilling into my brain right now. If the state and the feds could help us complete Route 30 over to the Ohio River, would be a tremendous economic boost. Would bring us closer to the petrochemical production that's going to be on the Ohio River. It would reduce transportation costs and really enable the county to become a new manufacturing center for plastics. So I know he would never forgive me if I didn't take that opportunity.
Great. Any other questions? Jennifer, okay, great. Well, in conclusion, I would just like to, again, thank the folks at Impact for putting on this event, thank our panelists, and I just wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and prosperous New Year. So thank you.
doing in the community and the Strengthening Stark Initiative. Not being from the area, as I'm sure there are several in the audience, something that you're not so familiar with if you're not on the ground here. So you guys are doing awesome things. Thank you.